All right. Good afternoon. We are going to be doing 3 things today. And you will need your cam chain tensioner, and Coach Molly labeled this 2, so I'm guessing you also did the same. But essentially it's got this arm. I don't know which view is better to see here. It's got this arm, it's got 2 wheels, it's got a little cylinder here, it's got an axle, but most importantly, it's got these 2 plugs. There's one here and there's one here. If you do not have these 2 plugs right here, if you don't have these, then there's not much you can do with this class period. And you need to email me and let me know that you do not have those 2 plugs. You will also need both pistons, and you will need your wrist pins that went with the pistons. I should have dug that out, and I don't know where they are. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so you may have labeled that pistons. You got wrist pins. You also actually have the 2 circlips that you took off of the pistons. We do not need many tools today, except maybe you might need a couple rags and maybe a pick, but that's about it. You will also, at some point towards the end, actually the last step, is putting on the base gasket. We'll get there. Okay, so first step is we're going to put this cam chain tensioner together and in. So you should have, and you may or may not have taken this thing completely apart, but there's a larger wheel. There's a smaller wheel that is in this little arm here. There is an axle that goes through this. There's this little cylinder that actually goes through here. And there are the 2 plugs that everyone drops in the engine and has to spend eternity trying to find. Right here. So put these in a safe spot. I don't know that this is terribly safe, but that's where I'm putting them right now. Okay, the cam chain tensioner. We can't put it together until we have it inside the chain. So go ahead and, if you have this thing apart, first make sure that the cylinder is inside the large wheel. The cylinder has a little notch on it, and it does not matter which way that goes. So push the cylinder into the wheel, and then go ahead and, so the notch is going to have to face the right side of the engine. So you can put the wheel in the chain like this. That little notch is pointing this way. And then you can take this arm, and you see that this has a little notch right here. Well, now you know why, because that has to fit right around that notch inside the wheel. So push this on here, and you can just kind of spread these arms apart to make it fit. So I've got it over, but the notch is not matched up. So I just need to kind of spin things around until I can get the notch in there perfectly. And once you feel like that notch is where it's supposed to be, it's always a little trickier than it looks. Once you have it where you think it's got to be, take your axle and slide it through, and if it slides through, you're good, and it just kind of sits right in here like this. So a couple things to note. This flat spot on the cam chain tensioner has to be pointing to the rear of the engine. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. This has to be pointing that way. So if you put it on and it's facing this way, it's wrong. Take it off, put it on the correct way. So it should look like this. And when you put this axle into these little spots in here where it goes, the open half and these holes right here should be pointing up, because that's where these two plugs go. They go right into these little spots here. I don't know that you want to put them in yet, because if you put them in and while we're putting the pistons on, something gets bumped and moved, they'll pop out and fall into the engine, and you're going to want to pull your hair out. So I'm going to take these two plugs, I'm going to put them aside, and I'm going to move on to the pistons and putting the pistons on the connecting rods. So the purpose of this cam chain tensioner is when the chain is all the way up through the engine and the camshaft is up at the top here, there needs to be tension on this chain. There can't be all kinds of slack in here, because as this thing's spinning around 1,000,000 miles an hour, if there's slack, it's going to start slapping around and it's going to wear the chain and it's going to break. So this tensioner right here is going to, there's a part of the engine that we took off that actually pushes this cam chain tensioner, which is probably in another bag just labeled cam chain tensioner 1, and it pushes right here. And as it pushes, it keeps this chain nice and tight on the sprocket that's around the cam, and tight so it doesn't come flying around and slapping around and get worn out too quickly. So that's the purpose of these two little wheels down here. Okay, we're going to move on to the pistons. You have two pistons, and you have removed the clip out of one side of each piston, and that side without the clip should face the outside of the engine. So on this piston, I've got the clip off, which means I want it to be here. On this piston, the clip is off on this side, so I want that piston to be here. Why? Just because trying to work on something through here is a pain. Working on something on the outside is easy. If you took all of your clips off, A, congratulations. B, you did more work than you needed to. So if you took all of your clips off, or even if you took 3 clips off, before you do any work with these pistons on the engine, go ahead and put a clip back in the inside part of the piston, and I'll be showing you how to do that in a moment. This is going to be kind of a struggle, and these clips are not easy to deal with. There's a lot of tension, and a lot of people struggle mightily trying to put that clip back in here. Also on your pistons, you may notice, depending on how dirty or how old or what brand of piston you have, there's a little arrow right here. That arrow points to the front of the engine, so you know that you're putting it on correctly. So the stuff I was telling you about where the clip goes and facing which side of the engine. What's more important is that this arrow is pointing in the right direction. And on this piston, I can barely see where that arrow was. It's right here, and I have it pointing towards the front of the engine. Another way to tell if you have these set up correctly is the front of the engine has a small little cutout. The front of the piston has a small little cutout. The back of the piston has a much larger cutout. The larger of the valves, the intake valve, is in the back. The exhaust valve is in the front. These little cutouts exist so that the valves don't touch the face of these pistons. So you have to make sure that your pistons are facing the proper direction. Okay, now I am going to take these off for a moment, and I'm going to rotate the crankshaft until this connecting rod is up as high as it goes. I'm going to rotate that by pulling the chain. Yeah, and that's right there. Okay, so this connecting rod is up high, this one is down low. Next step, you need a rag. You need to put a rag in here. So nothing falls into the engine, specifically the clip that you're putting on, that little circlip. So I'm just going to stuff a rag right there. Cool. Okay, so the trick to putting a clip in, at least I think it's a trick. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be as easy for many people as it is for me. I hold the clip with the opening like this. So put it in between your fingers, just like mine. And you should be able to squeeze it a little bit and kind of close that gap. If you squeeze too hard, it's going to like slip out of your fingers. So if you're putting a clip in, if you took both clips out of a piston, then to put it back in, it's a little bit easier because it's not going to be on the engine. So if you're putting a clip in the inside of the piston, you have the luxury of doing that while it's not connected to the engine. And here's how I do it. I hold it like this. I hold it right here. I get my thumb over the edge. So I'm holding it with my thumb right now. Because if I'm not holding it and I'm trying to squeeze it, it's going to slip out and it's going to shoot across your workspace and you will lose it. These don't make a loud noise when they hit the ground, so they're very, very difficult to find. So notice I've got the opening matched up with the little notch on this hole right here. And I'm holding it with my thumb, and I'm just going to squeeze it. And now look, it's most of the way in already. So now I can just use my fingernail and push it in a little further, push it in a little further. This is a good way to break a nail also. And it's still, I got to keep my thumb here because this thing could pop out any second and shoot across. So now I need my pick. This is also a good way to stab yourself. And I'm going to kind of push this into, push it into this area here. Now the trick, it's tricky when you're putting it on your piston outside your engine, like if you took two off, because it's not fitting right into that little notch. There's that little like ditch that goes all the way around here. You want that clip to fit in that little ditch, and mine snuck past it. You can probably see that it snuck past it here. So I need to pull it back a little bit. this is where it can get kind of tricky. Maybe I just start over. Starting here. I'm gonna hold it with my thumb. Squeeze it. See if I can get it in there with my nail. Of course I can't. It'd be too easy. And try and push it in with this pick without stabbing myself. Okay, that's a little closer to the little ditch it has to fit into. Maybe I can pull it in. Okay, got it. So it pulled right into that little ditch. And if I were working on the inside of the piston so that I could get it on here, that's how I would put it on. I did that just for demonstration purposes, but now of course I have to take this out because now I want to show you how to put this clip in after you have it. After you have the wrist pin inside the piston. Okay. All right, now going back to where most of you should be, and that is with a clip on the inside part of the piston, no clip on the outside part of the piston. Take your wrist pin and slide it through, and you're going to want to try and slide it through here, and all the way to this clip. I find that it's easier if I start the slide, if I start it and I push it to right, not here, you won't be able to get it on the connecting rod. So I pull it back a little bit until it's right there. So I've got the wrist pin pushed to here. And now I can put it over the connecting rod. I can look through the other side, make sure all holes are lined up, and then push the wrist pin through. So I pushed it until it won't go any further. I pushed it until it is touching the clip on the inside of the piston. And now I can put the clip on the outside of the piston. Hold it with my thumb. This one's actually easier because you don't have to, because you've got the wrist pin stopping it from going in too far. So I hold it with my thumb, squeeze it, and voila. I was able to do that with my fingernail that time. So that's in. Now I can take this rag out and put it in the other side. So I'm going to use this chain, the cam chain again, to lower the connecting rod that I just worked with, which raises the other. So this one is now up. I'm going to wrap a rag around it. Tuck the rag in. I'm going to start the, so I've got the clip. Clip is already in the inside part of the piston. There is no clip on the outside. I'm going to start my wrist pin, and I'm going to push it until it's about to pop through. If you have trouble pushing your wrist pin through, Sometimes you can't get it any further than like right here. Try flipping it around. Make sure the inside of this is spick and span clean. So take a pipe brush. I think you have a pipe brush that's a little bit bigger than this, and push it in here and clean it out. Wipe it out clean with a rag. Sometimes they are difficult to get through. Hopefully yours is not. If you want to try putting a drop of 3-in-1 oil on here and smoothing it around with your finger, that might help. So I'm going to get the wrist pin started, lay it over the connecting rod, line up the holes, and push the wrist pin through. That one's a little harder. I can't finish it with my fingers. So I'm going to take my 1/4-inch ratchet socket extension. I'm going to start it in here. I'm just going to slam it home a couple times, and until I can see the ditch on this side of the engine to put the other snap ring, the other circlip into. And with this circlip, now I'm going to be using my left hand. So I'm going to hold it with my thumb. I'm going to use my left hand to squeeze it, because I want the opening in the circlip to match up with that notch that the piston ring, or that the wrist pin just went through. Okay. That one went in ridiculously easy. I apologize. Take the rag out. Okay. So far, so good. So we got the pistons on. So you can rotate this and make sure that your pistons don't get hung up as they go up and down. It should move pretty easily. Now it's time to fight with the plugs. The axle, again, needs to be, the open parts of the axle need to be facing up, because the plug is going to go into the axle like that. That's what it's going to look like. So I'm going to rotate this a little bit, put this here, and do my best to put a plug in here on one side without dropping it into the engine. I never know the best way to do this. Some people use we don't have one. Yeah, I'm just going to use the fingers and gently put it in there, nice and flush. Second one. Oh man. Awesome. Second one is in. So the purpose of these plugs is to keep that axle from spinning around when all the madness is happening inside this engine. Those two holes have to be facing up, because that lets oil get into those holes and it keeps things cool. If these plugs are not in here, that axle would rotate and it might actually face down, and those plugs, those holes wouldn't be available for the oil to get into, and that could cause overheating and things could melt. So that's the purpose of these plugs. They're extremely important, and they're a big pain in the butt. Now we can put the, you need, there should be 2 dowels that go here. You should have a Ziploc bag that has dowels. Some are larger and some are smaller. You need the larger dowels. You need 2 of them. And you might find that they are still stuck in the bottom of your cylinders. And if they are, then leave them where they are. But if you don't have any in your cylinders and you don't have any on the engine, then hopefully you put them in a bag. Take these dowels, slide them over the studs, push them down into those holes a little bit. You don't need to go crazy, just make sure they're in there. And go into your big white envelope of gaskets. We are looking for the cylinder base gasket, which is this guy. There's the head gasket and the cylinder base gasket are the same shape, but the head gasket has a lot of metal in it. The cylinder base is just this thin paper stuff. So the difference is pretty major. This is a head gasket. This is the base gasket. You can see that there's metal inside the holes here. This is a lot thicker and a lot stiffer. This is much thinner and floppy. We want the thinner, floppy one right now. All right, take a look at that gasket and notice, you know, at first glance, everything looks symmetrical, but it's not. It's got these notches right here, and it's got this little nose right here. These notches fit over the notches that are here. The nose fits over the nose here. It's very easy to tear a gasket as you slide them over the threads on the cylinder, on the studs. So be careful. Get it past the threads, let it drop down. Stand your cam chain tensioner up as best you can. And get the gasket to fall over the pistons, over the dowels without ripping it. Sometimes you gotta wiggle things around to get it to go where you need it. And there you have it. I think that is probably enough for today. Hopefully you were pausing and restarting, and I made a lot of this look very easy, and I'm sure it's not. Don't give up. Just keep trying. If these wrist pins are tough to get in and out, just be patient. Twist them as you go. Sometimes that helps get them in and out. The circlips are a real bear. Be patient and just remember, hold it with one thumb and then squeeze it together and push it in with the other hand. And that's pretty much all we've got for today. When we meet on Friday, we will be putting the cylinders on and over the pistons. Not an easy task. Until then, I will see you. If you have any problems, if you lost anything, if you broke anything, email me immediately so that I can get replacement parts to you as quickly as possible so you don't fall behind. If you have already fallen behind, if you are 800 classes and 1,000,000 hours behind, don't let this stress you out. Just let me know what's going on. Tell me that you're way behind. I'm not going to get angry at you. I want you to catch up. I'll work with you. We can work one-on-one. We'll figure it out. All right? Okay, ladies. I will see you on Friday.